This is the new $800 flagship Nothing Phone 3. The most expensive phone the company has ever sold, and also the most polarizing when it comes to design. Some folks hate the asymmetrical camera rounds, other folks miss the larger glyph interface, and some folks are just good at making memes.
But whether you love or hate the look of this phone, I think there's one thing we can all agree on. A flagship phone deserves a flagship camera.
So last week, I got to living with this triple rear camera system.
We got the tiny fireworks and the fire extinguisher.
To see if this phone's camera is worth its flagship price.
I'm Becca, and take aside. This is the first one of the season. It's a little cold. Here we go. I'm gonna put Nothing's new flagship device against 3 other flagship devices who are the best in different departments. For example, the Pixel 9 Pro has a great ultra-wide lens. The iPhone 16 Pro has the best main lens, and the S25 Ultra, well, nobody can beat its telephoto lens. So, how does Nothing's flagship compare to all of those? Let's start with the ultra-wide.
The Phone 3 has a 50 megapixel f2.2 114-degree ultra-wide lens that can shoot up to 4K 60 frames per second video and output 50 megapixel photos that are wide without being too warped. But when compared to the Pixel 9 Pro's slightly wider and faster 123-degree f1.7 50 megapixel ultra-wide, a pattern in the Phone 3's camera starts to emerge. Nothing's camera system is typically brighter and punchier and often washes out the blacks far more, especially when it comes to video. At night though, because the Pixel has a slightly larger sensor, it does gather more light. But all that, you gotta go looking for. This next thing, you don't. The Pixel's macro lens is within its ultra-wide lens, which allows you to focus on objects that are closer to it while also providing this sort of larger-than-life feeling. Whereas in the Phone 3's macro abilities are within the telephoto lens, meaning that as soon as your subject is within maybe a foot of the Phone 3's ultra-wide, the camera won't be able to focus on it, and it's kind of limiting. Otherwise, the ultra-wide lens on the Phone 3 is in line with the offering from Google's flagship, though I'd love if it was a bit faster next year for better low-light performance. Especially in the video department, where low-light video can get pretty grainy pretty quick. But how about that new periscope telephoto? The Phone 3 has a 50 megapixel f2.7 periscope telephoto lens that is natively capable of a 3x zoom for a 70mm full frame equivalent. There's also a 6x zoom mode that crops into the center portion of the sensor to provide an 140mm focal length, but this is limited to a 12 megapixel output. Images from the sensor are fine, but I find it to be quite slow, especially when using the macro lens capabilities. Attempting to take a photo of a small fish, which I thought I was pretty far away from, took many shots before I finally got one that was clear. Perfectly still objects in great light or landscapes seem to be the safest bet for getting a solid shot with this lens. When compared to the S25 Ultra with its multiple telephoto lenses, the Phone 3 holds its own against Samsung's 10 megapixel f2.4 3x telephoto. But when you compare the Phone 3's cropped 6x telephoto to Samsung's native 5x telephoto, which is a 50 megapixel sensor, the Phone 3 just can't keep up. Megapixels don't always matter, but in this case, all those megapixels behind Samsung's lens are clearly producing a sharper image. That being said, in the native 3x telephoto race, the Phone 3 again brings more contrast to its images, which is surprising because I've always thought of Samsung as punchy as all hell. But Nothing has clearly taken the saturation and contrast win here. So which do you prefer? Let me know down below.
Okay, onto the main lens where I want to put it up against the iPhone 16 Pro.
The Nothing Phone 3 has a 50 megapixel f1.7 lens that equates to a 24mm full frame equivalent, and it has been perfectly capable at capturing my little upstate New York summer. Well, except for stargazing, where I wasn't very impressed with the incredibly dark images this phone captured. But head-to-head against the iPhone 16 Pro, the differences are marginal. If you zoom in, it becomes clear the iPhone is holding on to a bit more detail. But otherwise, the differences I can consistently spot are just color choices, especially when it comes to the blue of the sky or green and magenta shifts. Oh, and then there are times when the Nothing Phone 3 brightens everything far too much, whereas the iPhone isn't afraid to leave some shadows. Though, holy cow, I don't think anyone got this one right. Too green on the iPhone, too much evening out on the Phone 3. Another place where the differences are hard to spot and it really just comes down to color is video. I was surprised to see that the Nothing Phone 3 could mostly hold its own in the video department against the iPhone, a place where I think most folks consider the iPhone to be king, which gave me the idea.
As a creator, I could typically do my entire job from a phone, but can I do it from this phone? What you're about to see is the sponsored segment of this video. Thank you, XGIMI, for sponsoring this video and making a projector that Oh my god, I truly adore. Anyway, I recorded the entire sponsored segment on this device, including the VO, and I want to know if it does this projector justice. Here goes nothing. This is the Mogo 4. It's a portable projector that fully replaced our TV. But since the weather's getting nicer and XGIMI is having a sale, I had an idea. The portable power-based stand that extends the internal battery of the projector from 2.5 hours to 5 hours of playback time, plus XGIMI's portable outdoor screen, plus a sweet little bonfire. Oh my god. I mean, this might be the best choice I've ever made in my entire life. This tiny detachable remote makes it easy to switch between content, the battery outlasted our bonfire, and the dual 6-watt Harman Kardon speakers sound great. Yeah, I can't recommend this setup enough. You can grab the Mogo 4, the power-based stand, and the screen on sale this week via the link down in my bio. I know this is a sponsored segment, but folks, this is actually as good as it looks. That is what I would call not it. Here's side by side of what I would typically shoot this spot with. This is the Lumix S1 II, and in good light, the Phone 3 is actually fine, but this low light footage, that's where it falls apart. Obviously, these are incredibly different cameras with very different prices, sensors, technology, but it's safe to say that the Nothing Phone 3 won't be replacing my full frame camera for my professional work anytime soon. Thank you, XGIMI, for allowing me to do that test on your device. Also, I cannot recommend a movie night by a bonfire enough. Like, 11 out of 10 would recommend. So Nothing Phone 3's camera, it can keep up with most flagships because in good light, like those other devices, it can produce some really great images. But in low light, like those other devices, the image is fine. What I actually feel is lacking in this camera system though is something special. Like the Pixel has a nice ultrawide, but more importantly, it has great astrophotography. And the S25 Ultra has that far-reaching 50 megapixel telephoto, and the iPhone, it can shoot 4K 120 ProRes log to an external drive, or up to 4K 30 RAW internally. And the Phone 3 just doesn't have a specialty that both sets it apart from other Nothing devices or the rest of the flagship market here in the US. Oh, except for the red record light on the back, which I love. So yes, this phone has a good camera. It's just that it's nothing special. Now, I did as I usually do, and I put my personal SIM in this phone, so I need to talk about the design, but more importantly, I need to talk about the glyph matrix. Rock, paper, scissors, shoot. Hell yeah, brother. I was actually at dinner earlier tonight, and I had it, sitting on the table, and the server looked at it and said, wow, that's such a cool case on your phone, which was funny because there's no case on this phone. So whether you love this design or you hate this design, you have to admit that it is something different in a sea of same. This is to see who pays the bill. And the glyph matrix, or what Nothing calls the micro LED display on the back of the phone, is great. I am naturally a screen down person, and if you have texted with me, you know that I do not read notifications because I hate reading really anything, so having a small screen that I can customize to alert me of important messages or missed calls via a pictorial image has been great. I walk into a room, I see the envelope, and I know I have a text. It's a notification that I can understand at a glance without being distracted by everything else on my phone. I have also found myself loving the sun phases animation for knowing when the sun's gonna set, and the battery animation. Again, both useful, far more than just lights flashing like with the previous glyph interfaces. But the magic 8-ball and the rock, paper, scissors, and especially the sort of 8-bit mirror, yeah, I can live without those. Battery life has been on par with an iPhone or a Pixel, and I've obviously been shooting a ton of photos and videos, so I am only seeing about a day of use with the 5,150 milliamp hour silicon carbon battery. So it's safe to assume that if you're a power user, you can definitely get through a day with this phone, and if you're a little bit lighter on the use, then maybe even a day and a half. Lastly, we need to talk about the chip in this device. It's a Snapdragon 8S Gen 4, and Marquez said this on Waveform last week about it.
How many people buying these phones care about the chipset versus just deserve the better chipset at that price,
Agreed. So on the next flagship Nothing, you gotta put the flagship chip in it. And also maybe macro photography on the ultrawide, and just something special about the camera. All right, I'm Becca, but I'd love to know what you think of this device, what you think of all the photos and videos that came out of it. If you like this, subscribe to the world. I appreciate you, and I'll see you on the next one.